as Tom mentioned, I sort of have taken some unusual twists and turns in my own career, and we can talk about, how those things came about. But what I would say from the onset is that, having a strong team of professional people on my side helped me to make very tough decisions along the way when it came to my career and otherwise. So I think that the theme for today is really about how do you put together that kind of network or team, particularly when you are interested in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, building those particular careers. And for you all, starting at the stage where you are engaged in college, so your higher education path, which includes many different potential directions that we're all coming from. Obviously, we have different goals with some shared expectations. There are lots of challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities, resources, and ultimately great successes. So this first slide is really just meant to represent, how do we put all of this together, and what are some of the things that people who have traveled along the roads that you all are thinking about or are currently doing it, what are the lessons that we've learned and what can we share with you? So in thinking about this slide, the idea of having role models, mentors, and a network, including a peer network, is really what I would consider to be the heart of success, or what the formula for success looks like. And then ultimately, with your own success in completing a bachelor's degree, the world is really your oyster when it comes to what could come next for you. And, hopefully we'll have time to maybe today or at a future session to really go into all of the career possibilities, but they really are endless when it comes to STEM fields. And I work currently with graduate students and postdocs who are interested in biomedical research. So either starting their own labs or teaching or doing any number of things. And the message that I have for them is think about your career in its entirety, and you'll be able to make great choices all along the way. So every step is an opportunity, but it's not the last step that you're going to take. Okay, so when we talk about networking, we're really a working definition that we can go by is what's shown here: building and maintaining meaningful professional relationships. And the keys there are really the build and the maintain. So networking requires a lot of commitment over time. And it's not a one and done kind of thing, right? We really are talking about building relationships that may come and go, but ultimately you're investing some energy for long-term success, right? One of the other keys to networking is that it's strong relationship building with reciprocity, right? It's not I'm asking you for something and that's it. You should really be thinking about, ultimately, what do you have to offer? What can you provide? And what are you seeking from a given mentor or member of your network? So the goal for really starting out as a good foundation for networking is to build connections within and outside of your organization or institution. So wherever you are, you want to think sort of beyond that particular environment. And one thing that's really sort of important to think about, most times we think of networking as you want someone who's very far ahead of you, or the head of a company, or the top person in charge. But a lot of important networking comes from those that are either your peers, someone a step or two ahead of you, or those who are junior to you. So we'll think about that in a few slides when we talk about building a network. But don't forget those who are, a few steps seemingly behind where you are. And I think one of the joys that I've had as a teacher, especially a professor with undergraduates, is that those are some of the best mentors in my network now and the best peers are those who are actually, at one point were quite junior to me, but over time, our roles have shifted. And that idea of reciprocity and what they have to offer and what I offer to them has grown and changed over time. So that's a pretty nice way to imagine. So don't forget those youngsters in building a network. Now, whenever I talk to scientists, budding scientists, whatever stage you are about networking, I usually hear people say, oh, I hate networking because typically I'm an introvert, right? So in this particular slide, the person kind of hiding back here at this career fair or professional event is me. I'm an introvert through and through, in the sense that any sorts of professional events or large groups are generally energy draining for me, right? So I have a certain amount of dread, and I'm much more charged in smaller groups or even on my own. But that is really should not be a limitation to networking. And in fact, as we'll talk about in a second, introverts, if you consider yourself introverted, you can be quite successful at networking. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum are the extroverts that are very outgoing, very excited. They love a crowded room. They will work everyone in that room and want to meet everyone, and that's great too. But a lot of times people have an expectation as an extrovert. I say one thing and I've got the job. I've got the goal right then and there, and that's not necessarily the case either. So whether you consider yourself introverted or extroverted or anywhere in between, I think the key to this relationship building is really about listening to each other, learning from each other, and then building upon that knowledge base. So regardless of personality, it is very easy to devote energy to becoming successful at networking, and again, using that skill and building it throughout your career. So this is a word cloud from asking the question, why is networking so important? And you can think of lots of answers like, getting opportunities such as internships, your own personal and professional development, helping with decision-making, for getting good advice, career development, all of these great answers. So of course, these are important things to be able to, we talked about resources and opportunities. So being able to network really is a way to get closer to all of those goals. But one analogy that I have found to be really compelling and I can relate to a lot is something called the Iceberg Illusion, which I don't know if you all have seen this or heard much about it. But, I give a lot of talks and have great introductions. And I guess the older you get, hopefully, you have more successes to report and reflect upon. But that success is really just the tip of the iceberg. And you'll reach a point where all people kind of see or what they recognize are those successes. But in fact, particularly for scientists and those in technology fields, getting to that or to those successes, there are a lot of pieces that are kind of hidden away, right? So what people don't see along the way is obviously a lot of dedication, an incredible amount of hard work that's often done solo or with a smaller group of people who understand what it is that you're doing, developing good habits, being able to manage a lot of disappointment for scientists working at the research bench or those involved in research in many areas. It can be quite disappointing, right? Things don't often work out the way you planned, but the idea is that you keep doing until you search again, right? Until you get that better understanding and knowledge that you seek. There's a lot of sacrifice involved in it, and I know you all are already well aware in terms of the time and managing and having to sometimes give up things that you would rather be doing to invest in your education and your degrees. Persistence is the key, right, to all of this success that will come, and some way managing failure and disappointment. So to get all of those things, it really requires a lot of support, right? And I think building a network that can understand maybe not all aspects of the challenges and the successes that you'll have, but certainly can help you gain all these skills and move past difficult moments and celebrate the successes. So when we think about a network and who we're going to build these relationships over time, your network is actually already a lot larger than you think, and it's pretty easy to begin to cultivate a larger professional network with a little bit of thought and a lot of practice. So for where you all are, one of the biggest sources or resources in your network are your professors and teachers, right? So they can help with a lot of those skills and approaches that you'll need for success. And I have to say that what surprised me the most about being an undergraduate, so a college professor, was in some ways a lot of students didn't necessarily utilize me as a professor. So even at a very small liberal arts college, right? A lot just going to class and getting that knowledge and that interaction, whether it's in lab or maybe smaller groups, is just, again, the tip of the iceberg. Utilizing your professors as an important part of your network is something that you can do a lot with. So they're also advisors. Now, you might have been assigned to an academic advisor or an advisor that's part of a club or organization that you're involved in. And these are obviously people that might be a little bit more removed from your academic discipline or your major, but they're also going to be important parts of your professional network. Similarly, you can have mentors, such as through this great program and other people that you'll meet along the way. And we're going to talk about sort of the differences between advisors and mentors in a second. But that category, in terms of having mentors in your network, is very important. We've already hinted at the value that having colleagues and peers, and there's another term called near peers, so people just a little bit ahead of you. And those are really critical parts of your network, especially as students, right? So again, I guess I won't call it a surprise, because certainly as a biology major, when I was an undergraduate, I resisted group learning and study groups and those kinds of things like the plague. And I have spent a long time thinking about why I was so resistant to that until probably about my senior year of college. And I realized that a lot of it just had to do with the study habits that I had built in high school. I studied alone. I sort of built a way of learning that was very solo. And I didn't realize how important it was to expand or adapt that strategy when I was an undergraduate. So it was a struggle for a long time. So I think relying on opportunities to work with peers, you're probably asked to do group learning at different points. So in labs, you're going to have lab partners and benchmates and so forth, and project team members. So all of those are really opportunities, not only to meet the goals of that particular class or project, but to bring important members of your network. And really, those can be some of the longest lasting relationships that you'll have, which is fantastic. And then, of course, family and friends. In my case, I didn't have, my parents weren't scientists and, certainly were interested in my success, but didn't necessarily want to know all the gory details about all the experiments and all of the things I found so exciting. But they were a huge source, obviously, of support and friends in other majors or in other careers ultimately are hugely valuable to this day and should also be included as part of a healthy and well-maintained network. So from this collective, you can get motivation, the advice, you can celebrate the successes that come your way, think about which directions you're going into, hitting your goals, making sure they're attainable goals, and so forth. So the ability to put together this kind of team, as you've heard me call it for a while, is hugely important and will continue throughout your career. So one thing to think about is what I think of or describe as an inclusive mentoring team. And by that, I'll give you a couple of examples. So an advisor can be someone who helps to facilitate introductions at various points during your career. And you can share with them a very discrete goal that you have, whether it's career-wise or a particular aspiration that you have. So for example, if your goal is to find a summer opportunity or maybe a work study job or whatever that discrete goal that you have for that particular point in time, often an advisor can be someone to help you achieve that particular point and goal. But that's a little different than a mentor, who's someone that you can trust. You build a trust that you can share all of your goals, big and small, short and long term. And importantly for mentors, you can share those highs, the lows, things that have gone well, things that have not gone as well. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it took me a really long time to kind of figure out the distinction between, like, not all advisors are mentors, but finding, and you can't necessarily say to someone, you will be my mentor. I think it's a relationship that sort of builds and grows organically over time, but it is certainly an important person or people to have in your network. And then finally, there's a category to think about in terms of your network or your mentoring team of sponsors. And these are people that, they may know you, but they also more so know your success, what you're great at, what you've done a fantastic job. They know all the good moments that you have, and they use those often behind the scenes to help you advance or to help opportunities find their way to you. So having sponsors comes out of the type and the expanse of your network, and getting yourself out there to show how good you are or how good you're becoming at particular things, so that you have sponsors in your network. And I should say one more thing is that, it's very rare that one person can be all of these things all of the time. But certainly people at different points in your relationships can serve in these different roles. So it really is, I thought that, okay, I have a mentor that does all of these things, but in fact, there are lots of different people who can help to do maybe one or two of these roles in your life at a given time. So think about what it is that you hope to gain as you're building a relationship, but realize that things can change for the better with time. So this next slide, I wanted to put to think about different buckets or needs that you might have from your network, from your mentoring and your team, your professional team. So if you think of something like substantive feedback, right? Who are people that can read your, a paper that you've written, or some body of work, a fellowship application, a scholarship application, your resume, those types of things. Who can give you substantive feedback in a way that is useful to you and will help you achieve a goal. You need people who can be useful for your professional development. So what we mean by that is, in addition to the coursework and the technical skills that you might be gaining, you also need to be thinking about your ability to communicate effectively, your role in leadership development, and then also in being part of a successful member of a team. So those kinds of professional development skills, you want to have people in your network who can help build those. Access to opportunities is huge. This is why we're here. And I think the more people who know what it is you're thinking of doing or hoping to do at a given step, they can help to provide those opportunities for you. And then this is where your peers can also be incredibly useful, because they know about opportunities or they've heard of different resources that you don't necessarily know about. So having people that can help you gain access to opportunities is an incredibly important part of your professional network. And then the emotional support that we all need along the way. Oftentimes our friends and families are the biggest parts of that, but you'll find that as your relationships grow and develop, starting from a professional point, those mentors in particular can be great sources of emotional support for you. Okay, so I wanted to end this part of my presentation before we open it up and we get to talk, which is the fun part, the discussion, is to think about, okay, so where can I find these networking members or team? Where can I do this kind of team building? So we mentioned professors, your teachers, as a huge resource. So whether it's virtual office hours, making appointments, really give those people and those professionals a chance to know you outside of the classroom setting. So take advantage of those office hours and the ability to connect with these key members of your team, especially right now. Your universities or colleges will have some sort of career center or career services office. That is a huge starting point for building a professional network. They have access to alumni. They have a ton of resources that they're gathering all the time. So you should be familiar with them and they should be familiar with you. We can all do Google searching and find people, but you need to know even just a name or a starting point, as well as a connection, right? You have something in common if you've attended the same university or you know the same people at a career center and so forth. And those, again, are often overlooked, or you only think about it when you're a senior, about to graduate, and maybe, want to go to that resource at that time. You should be doing it from tomorrow if you haven't already. And then we've already talked about LinkedIn, and it seems like everyone has a profile. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the only social media presence that I have, but it's the one that I use, obviously, for networking. And there are a lot of great tools to search through LinkedIn to find connections that you might have with people, especially people that you don't necessarily know, but are looking for a way to begin an interaction. So those are some of the resources as a great starting point. Now, there's some kind of nuts and bolts that I think are important and that I've decided to include as a way to, give some details. And I'm coming from the perspective of someone who gets a lot of emails or requests to interact in different ways, right? So if you are going to reach out to someone, especially someone you don't necessarily know or haven't met yet, the subject line in that email, in my opinion, is pretty important. I get a lot that say hello or, just kind of vague. I'm guilty of sending a lot that just say question, but that doesn't really help the person on the other side, nor does it make them want to open that email, right? So think about a question about this particular scholarship or summer research opportunity, something very specific in that subject line that will immediately help the recipient decide, okay, I know what this is about, or this will be a good thing to open up and possibly respond to right away. Within the body of that, you want to talk about why you're reaching out to this person. If it's a connection, if you read some of their work, someone recommended that they talk to you, say that right away. And that helps to immediately build some type of connection that makes the recipient more likely to read through and hopefully respond. Okay, those two things and others involve doing your homework, right? You don't want to reach out to someone with a question or a request that you could have easily found that information. You want to do a little bit about your homework about what they do and who they are to help shape the question or the ask that you are initially going to engage in. Right? You want to make your request specific and concise. Make it short, especially the first time you're reaching out to people. I'm an undergraduate at Drexel, and I am looking for your advice on how to get experience doing X, or I'd love to learn more about your career. We're going to talk, and Adrian mentioned informational interviews, and that's a fairly common term when you are reaching out to someone. But you could even say, I'd like 15 minutes of your time to learn about X, Y, or Z. And that makes it easier for the person to respond with that specific request. You can build from there, but right now you want to just get that correspondence going and get that response, that reply. I'm surprised by the number of times there isn't necessarily a thank you for your time, or I appreciate, any time that you have to offer. So don't forget to include that. Okay, so I give this advice, and I try to take this advice and use it quite regularly, but there's nothing more disappointing than you hit send and you don't get an immediate reply, right? And then you start to think, oh, well, this person isn't interested, or what should I do? And I debate a lot with some of my colleagues about how long you need to wait before you reach out again. So I am on the side where you give people a little bit of time. If it is a time-sensitive request, that's a different story. But generally, 2 weeks or, whatever amount of time, not the next day or within 24 hours that some people sometimes expect. But when you're going to reach out again, if you forward the first email and just say, you're circling back to check in, that helps to remind the person more often than not that email has gotten lost in the inbox. And so it's an easy way to get back to the top of their radar. And then finally, if you don't hear back after a second email, don't take it personally, but move on. You're developing a wide and a deep network of people. So, keep going with multiple requests for the specific request that you have at that moment. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket with one person.